Hello, this is for TreeLoft, and I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell me a little something about your family background that brought you to Savannah.
Okay, I am Nosson Garfunkel. I go by my Hebrew name, and my family has been here since 1860. My great-grandfather, Benjamin M. Garfunkel, came to Savannah in 1860 with the Rabhan family. They knew each other from Europe, and they were living in New York, and Mr. Rabhan was told that he needed to go south for his health. So my grandfather, who was a friend of his, said, "I'll go with you," and they came here to this Savannah, and they went to the Jewish community that was here in Savannah and said, "We need to have a Orthodox Ashkenazic shul." And the people said, "Fine, we don't mind that." And in fact, my grandfather told them, my great-grandfather told them they needed to put a mechitza in the shul, which is a petition between the men and the ladies. And they said, "Well, a petition." He said, "Fine, we'll do a temporary one." And that night, when they had put in the temporary petition, he came back to the synagogue with a lantern, dug around the petition because it was a dirt floor, poured cement in, and then covered the cement back over with the dirt, and they never knew the difference. And from there, that's where the B.B. Jacob Synagogue started. And we know today the B.B. Jacob is the largest Jewish organization in all of Savannah. There's no other Jewish organization that's as large, that has as many family members as we do in the B.B. Jacob. My family has been very active in the Jewish community, from my great-grandparents to my grandparents to my parents, and with myself and my brothers, and now our children. My great-uncle, our business name is A.J. and C. Garfunkel. A.J. was my great-uncle, Abraham Joseph, and C. was my grandfather, Charles. And my great-uncle served as a city councilman here in Savannah from 1900 to 1929. My grandfather served as chief of police from 1903 to 1907. And my father served as the mayor pro tem, the vice mayor of Savannah, from 1966 to 1970. So we have some history here in Savannah. My mother and my father were in charge of the ritual bath, the mikveh, here in Savannah. My mother was my great aunt, Eugenia, who we knew as Tanty. She was the president of the Benos Chesed Shel Emma Society, which is the Ladies' Burial Society. And she was also the president of the Hebrew Women's Aid Society, and she served in both of those positions for over 50 years. When she passed away, my mother took over for her, and my mother served in as president of those two organizations for 30 years. And the Hebrew Women's Aid Society, by the way, is a charitable society that helps out people here in Savannah, Jewish people that need help financially, and they have always been there to help. When my mother passed away, my wife took over the position, and she's now the president of both of the organizations. The one thing that they did back in 1915 is they built a chapel at Bonaventure Cemetery, which is the only Jewish chapel in Georgia. And somebody had mentioned to me that it might be the only chapel in all the cemeteries in Georgia. I'm not sure of that, but I know it's the only Jewish chapel in the state of Georgia. My father and Rabbi Rosenberg, who served as the rabbi of our congregation for 35 or 40 years, they, along with Governor Carl Sanders, were able to do something that a lot of states didn't have the ability to do. A lot of people back in the 50s and 60s were advertising kosher, where it was really just kosher style and not really kosher. And Governor Sanders, along with my father and Rabbi Rosenberg and Rabbi Feldman from Atlanta, were able to get passed through the legislature that you could advertise kosher style, but if you advertised kosher, it had to be 100% certified by an Orthodox rabbi. My parents were also instrumental in the start of the Hebrew Academy of Savannah, which was the first day school here in Savannah. That turned into the Savannah Hebrew Day School, of which they also helped start back in 1960. My father served as a vice president. My mother served as a board member. I became the president of the Savannah Hebrew Day School in the 80s, and my brother Charles has served as president of the Rambam Day School, which was a collection of 2 day schools that were here, and they formed 1 day school, and that day school now is still in existence and doing very well. We are very active in the synagogue. We're active in the Heritage Quilts, of which I'm the president, and my brother Charlie is the vice president. My brother David is the financial secretary and treasurer. And we have remained active in the Jewish community. Everybody that works for us at our office, all the Jewish people that work for us in our office, have a learning session with one of the rabbis of the kollel that we have here in Savannah, and they're all active in the synagogue and in the Heritage Quilts and in the Jewish community. And we, of course, have a large business. We have the largest real estate business probably between South Carolina and probably between Charleston, South Carolina, and Jacksonville, Florida. And we have shopping centers that we own across America, and we have a large insurance business. We are closed for all holidays, Jewish holidays, and we are also closed on Shabbos for the Sabbath, as we have been for the 110 years that we've been in existence.
Let me ask you a few questions about your parents and grandparents. What type of jobs did they have when they first came to Savannah?
My great-grandfather had a store on Broughton Street called B. Garfunkel and Sons, and they made the hoop skirts and the hoops for the hoop skirts, which was back in, of course, the late 1800s. My grandfather and my great-uncle in 1908, 1907, 1908, started AJ&C Garfunkel, which at that time was a real estate and a financial lending company. And my father, of course, came to work in the 30s, and he had graduated, or he went to Columbia University, and then came home. He also served in the Air Force, and from 1942 to 1946, when he married my mother at 46, and they lived here in Savannah. And he was the principal of AJ&C Garfunkel and ran it. And then he brought his 3 sons into the business, and now we are the principals of the business.
You mentioned about a lending company. Was this in conjunction with what was being done with the Workmen's Circle, or in competition with, or was it a different
No, this
purpose?
was a financial lending institution like a bank would be. It was, I'm trying to think of the name of it, because we found an old box that had the name of it on there, but I can't remember the name of it. But it was a regular lending institution where people would come that needed money, and they were willing to lend the money. We'll tell you an interesting story very quickly. My great-uncle Harry was the head of Grayson Stadium. He ran the stadium for many, many years. My uncle Louis Garfunkel, was the head of the auditorium. And I've heard many, many stories from a lot of people about how he promoted shows and especially boxing events. And my dad told me that he owned a row house, group of houses in a row house alongside of the auditorium. And there were a group of men who wanted to buy it from him, But my great uncle didn't want to do that because the people that lived there were so poor that when they paid him rent, he took their rent money and went to the grocery store and bought them groceries and brought it back to them. And they said, well, if you don't do it, we're going to have somebody make you do it. And they sent a message over to Charleston, South Carolina, and they had a boxer, an Afro-American boxer, come to Savannah to beat up my Uncle Louis, who happened to be an amateur boxer. And he came, and my Uncle Louis was standing on the steps of the auditorium, and the man came up and he says, I'm looking for Louis Garfunkel. Instead of telling him he was Louis Garfunkel, he said, what do you want him for? He says, I've been sent over here to beat him up, and with that, my Uncle Louis hauled back and flattened him with a left hook, and the man was taken to jail, and the men that sent him over never bothered my uncle again, and the row houses stayed there. So today, of course, they've been knocked down, but this was probably back in the 20s, maybe 30s.
You know, you hear about sunshine politics nowadays, and certainly that is a kind of a bizarre story of how politics maybe wasn't always so above board. But something that does interest me is I've heard a lot of people tell me that their families were grocers or merchants of some type, because that translated from what they were allowed to do in Europe when they came here, and that it was an easy, fast cash business. So the two things that I'd like you to tell me a little bit about is, number one is because many people worked hand on hand with the local people, as you were just telling in your story, that there was a connection to other minority groups and how that went with your family. But more interesting is that your family seems to have bucked the odds, and in an era when Jews were not the flavor of the month and often suspect as individuals, businessmen, and as people, your relatives managed to be appointed to positions of secular civic authority, even to the extent of the police chief, which is quite an unusual story. Can you talk to one of those 2 points?
I will say that it's not only my family, but many families here, Jewish families here in Savannah. The Jewish community has always flourished here in Savannah. The Irish Catholic community and the Greek community and the Jewish community have always been very, very close friends. I still have friends that I grew up with that are very close to me. And in fact, it used to be a funny thing that when the Hellenic Center would come to play against the JA basketball, nobody could tell which kids were Jewish and which kids were Greek, because everybody was together and they all looked the same. And I could tell you that the Irish Catholic community, there was a man named Tony Ryan who was instrumental sitting on the board of Memorial Hospital when the refugees were coming in from Russia, and they had to have a bris because the men there in Russia had not had a bris, had a circumcision for the covenant, and Memorial didn't want to let Rabbi Asa, who was the mohel at the time, go into the hospital to do the surgery there. And Tony Ryan stood up in a meeting at Memorial Hospital, of which he served, I think, as vice chairman, and said, I will not tolerate this. We will absolutely allow them. And nobody argued with Tony. They said, fine, if that's what Mr. Ryan says, that's all we needed to hear. And they allowed Rabbi Asa to come in. I will also mention that Broughton Street, which was the main shopping street in Savannah, was almost primarily Jewish. All the merchants were Jewish. And on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there would be advertisements in the newspaper saying we will be closed for the holidays, and a lot of my non-Jewish friends said there was no reason to go to Broughton Street on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur because there were no stores open. Everything was closed. The Jewish community has, we really have not had the anti-Semitism that has taken place in other communities. I won't say we don't have any, but it certainly was not rampant like it was in other communities, and most people got along. You never heard of violent crimes back in the time when I was growing up, and of course we wish we could return to those times, because today there's so much crime, it's really a shame. And I think Savannah might have lost a little bit of its flavor with some of the new things that have come around. But Savannah, being a beautiful city and a hostess city of the South, has many, many visitors to come. And we hope to continue to prosper here in Savannah, our children, our grandchildren. And all I can say is thank you very much to Savannah, because you've been a wonderful city and it's a wonderful place to live and raise your children.
Not so much in your era, but certainly at the time that your grandfather and great uncles were part of the civic scene, the civic government. That wasn't too far after the Leo Frank case in Atlanta. Do you remember hearing any stories of how they needed to tone down any ritual observance, or they had to mesh better with the general population, or kind of play ball with people who were not Jewish in order to make sure they were able to get whatever agenda they needed to across?
Actually, I don't remember anything about that. And I can only tell you from the time that I grew up, and of course my father always mentioned to me when he grew up here, that there was just never any open anti-Semitism or any problems, and everybody got along. I mean, I can remember as a 6-year-old boy walking through Forsyth Park with my grandmother at 9 o'clock at night, and you didn't have to worry about being attacked or having any problems. It was a very, very peaceful time, and in Savannah it was extremely peaceful. And again, when I grew up, you never really heard of any kind of violent crimes.
So I'm going to talk about something that seems a little less, more removed from you, and then I'm going to come back to your personal story, and that is the civil rights movement. I've spoken to a lot of people growing up in the South, where things were segregated, that they worked or ignored the civil rights movement, that they had relationships with minorities through their businesses and through their homes that maybe transcended what was going on nationally. Can you speak a little bit to growing up in white Savannah and the Jewish relationship with the minorities?
Okay. Growing up here, yes, it was segregated, but I can tell you that I know Jewish families that had people that worked for them for a lifetime, that they were very respectful of them, and they were very respectful of us. I can tell you that I would get a potch, that means a slap, if I didn't say yes ma'am, or yes sir, or no sir, or no ma'am. You don't tell anybody no or yes, you say yes ma'am or yes, And I don't really remember any problems that we had. I can tell you that even after the housekeeper that my father grew up with, who also helped raise us, I can tell you that after she passed away, that she had a daughter that was sick, and we continued to send a check on a weekly basis to take care of the daughter. And I think there are a lot of Jewish people that could tell you that they've done the same with the minorities here in Savannah. I think that certainly things have changed today, but back in those days, it was peaceful. Everybody was respectful, and I think that everybody wanted the civil rights movement to prosper, but I think that today it has gotten to a point where I think people don't have the respect they had for each other back in that time. And a lot of people think they're entitled to things and don't have to work for things. And back in those days, everybody worked. There wasn't welfare. Everybody worked and everybody did, and they made a living. And there were charitable organizations that would help the poor. And I think the minorities flourished. And certainly the community that I grew up in was flourishing. And it's too bad we can't go back to those times, because those were really wonderful times, and it was a very peaceful time.
Tell me about your basic secular education. Tell me also about your Jewish education, and I'm very interested in learning. You're a man of deep religious and ritualistic convictions. Does that come from a life lived in your family unit? Does it come from synagogue observance, or does it come from just teachings that you've learned over time that have become a part of who you are?
I would say all three. I would say that number one, I grew up in a religious home, a modern Orthodox family. My great-grandfather, of course, was Orthodox. My grandfather and all the family, including my grandchildren, we've all grown up in an Orthodox setting. My father and mother were very, very much into a lot of things in the Jewish community. My father, I meant to mention, my father also served as chairman of the UJA drive for the Savannah Jewish Federation. And in fact, in I'm trying to think what year Reagan was elected, my father was approached by a gentleman from the National Federation office. He had come down here to speak, and he asked if he could meet with my father because Ronald Reagan wanted to appoint him as the Jewish liaison to the White House. He, of course, had no desire to serve in that capacity, and he didn't, but it was interesting that it was offered to him. But my education, I went to public school here in Savannah. In the 9th grade, I went away to Near Israel Rabbinical College in Baltimore. I was really sort of green behind the ears. I didn't know a lot at that time. I mean, I had been raised in a modern Orthodox family. We kept kosher, we kept Shabbos. But the yeshiva life I had not really known at that time. I was not comfortable there, and I came back and finished high school here in public school. After high school, I went away. I went to Far Rockaway, New York, to the Sha'or Yashuv Yeshiva, which is a rabbinical college. And I went there and I studied there for several years under the leadership of Rabbi Freifeld. I then went to college in Miami, came back. I wanted to share in the business with my father, going to business with my father. I came back and got my insurance license and have worked here in AJ&C Garfunkel for many years. In the afternoons from Monday through Thursday, an hour before Mincha, the afternoon service, I give a class of which Carol, your father, Oliver Sholem, used to attend. I used to pick him up to come to my class. I still have that class today. That class has now been going on for about 15 years. It's a pleasure to leave the office and go there because I enjoy that very much. I give a class on Saturday night to young children, which I get from anywhere from 4 to 12 children every Saturday evening, right after synagogue, and we study the Parsha, the topic of the week in the Bible. My children have all gone away to yeshivas and to seminaries. My grandchildren are all in the Rambam Day School, and that's where my background came from, right here in Savannah, and then from yeshiva, the yeshiva life, and we enjoy it very much. And but again, we're part of this community. We, serve in certain capacities in the community, and the one love that I have here in this community, the one thing that I really truly enjoy is I'm a golfer, and I love to play golf. And I don't wear my long coat when I'm playing golf. Everybody asks me, do you wear that long coat? I don't wear that long coat when I play golf, but I do enjoy golf, and I play with many people, Jewish and non-Jewish, and have lots of friends that I play with, and so it's quite an enjoyment.
I'm glad you brought it up because the next topic was sports. I'm interested in hearing, you had mentioned just briefly some basketball, and now you've mentioned golf. I'm interested in hearing growing up in and around the Jewish Community Center. And I know there was a time that, probably before your time, that the Jewish Community Center was not centered where it was, and the three synagogues were in closer proximity for things like dances and group socialization. With the move in 1955 to its current location, and Jews kind of moving all over the place, not necessarily staying within the area, there has been a change in the community. But at the time, think back to when you were a younger man, and tell me what life was like in the Jewish community of your youth.
It was wonderful.
Okay.
There wasn't a day that went by that there was no less than 200 kids at the JA every afternoon. Now during the summer we were there all day, but during the wintertime when we went to school, we had Hebrew school in the afternoon, and the Hebrew school was made up of all three congregations. All three congregations made up this Hebrew school. It was 4 days a week. There were 2 sessions. The younger kids went from like 4 o'clock to 5:15, and the older kids went from 5:15 to like 6:30. And this was 4 days a week. And we were very active with everything. I mean, you had to sign a paper to put your name on the list to play pool at the game room, or to play ping pong, because there were so many people there waiting to use the table or waiting to use the pool tables. It was a wonderful, wonderful time. We had AZA and BBG, we had Young Judea, we had NCSY, there was USY, there was TGY.
Yeah, the Temple Youth Group.
And TYG.
TYG.
And everybody was respectful of each other. I will say that Rabbi Rosenberg, no one would try to step on his toes. The conservative and the reform, whatever Rabbi Rosenberg said, that was it. That was the law. Nobody argued. Unfortunately, when Rabbi Rosenberg passed away, there was somewhat of a struggle between some of the local rabbis who was going to be the leader, and some people didn't, got into some emotional problems with that. But at that time that I grew up, it was wonderful. Everybody was active in the Jewish community. We didn't hear of any parting of the ways. There was no arguments. Everybody got along, and I hope those days will come back.
Tell me about the social activities. I hear a lot about the dances, trying to get Jewish kids together.
There were, and at that time, AZA and BBG, of course, had dances, probably 3 dances a year for each one of them. And I don't know why, but there was sort of an understood rule that guys from Savannah had to invite a girl from out of town to come, and the girls from in Savannah were invited by boys from out of town, and they would have, and it was unbelievable. But I will tell you that on Shabbos afternoon, my sister Betsy and myself, who were at that time of age for AZA and BBG, and of course went to all the dances, we were religious, so we couldn't go anywhere on Saturday afternoon. So everybody came to our house. We would have 200 or 300 kids in the backyard playing badminton, playing kickball, just socializing. It was a truly, truly wonderful time. I will also tell you that when we played sports at the JA, basketball, you couldn't get a seat in the gym when we had games because everybody supported it. I will tell you that during the summer, the pool, if you didn't get there early, you couldn't find a seat because everybody came to the pool. There were no less every afternoon. There were no less than 200 or 300 people. On Sundays, there were probably 500 or 600 people. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful feeling to be part of that time.
I know the minhag has changed a little in terms of girls and boys, especially in the more traditional community, at dances together or swimming together. But in general, what is it about the community that has changed, do you think, that makes those days gone by so different in terms of the use of our communal resources?
You know, I think that I remember back in growing up, for example, the rabbi of the conservative shul, the AA, was religious. They would, you know, and I know today they have a rabbi that's religious, meaning he's Shomer Shabbos. But back then, the rabbi, a lot of the rabbis came from the Orthodox Union. They just couldn't find a job in an Orthodox synagogue and had to take a job somewhere. And their services were more like an Orthodox service, but the men and women sat together. Today, I think with the influx of European Jewry after the Holocaust, I think that the religious people that came in and the yeshivas in teaching Torah, we understood and found out that these sometimes you can't mix the boys and the girls and the men and the women together. And I think those have some of the different things that have happened within the community, especially with the kollel, with the day school, and being able to study Torah and learn more. We were able to understand that you're not supposed to mix, that there shouldn't be mixed dancing, there shouldn't be mixed swimming, and people are very respectful of it. We don't go to the JA and tell the JA, oh, you can't have this and can't have that. Whatever you want to do, that's your business to do. If we want our children to, you know, the girls to go swim in one pool and the boys go swim in a different pool, then that's our business. But we try to be respectful of everybody's way of life. God gave everybody, God gave all men and women the ability to choose the path they want to choose. And he allows them to have freedom of choice. What people want to do is their business, it's not my business. What I do is my business, and I teach my children in a certain way. Other people teach their children a certain way, and everybody has to learn to be respectful of each other.
When my husband and I moved here 28 years ago, we joined 3 shuls. We joined Hadassah. We joined all of the local Jewish organizations. And when I was asked about it, I said, well, this is the smallest Jewish community I've ever lived in, and I want to make sure that we support everything that's Jewish. Do you think, you know, I watch as people move into town and they don't necessarily affiliate, or they don't join the community center because they're only joining a shul, or they don't join anything at all because they're living out away from, been there, done that, they're just retiring here. Regardless of someone's personal religious ritual, do you think there's a way that we can get back to a point where we believe in the need for each other? Or does it take a tragedy like what's going on in Israel right now to bring us together?
You know, it's a great question. And I have my personal thoughts about it. I feel that, you know, I don't like the terms Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist.
I'm a post-denominational Jew.
These are all made-up terms by human beings. God gave us a Torah. He gave us a Torah to live by. It wasn't just for the people in Moshe's times or in Joshua's times. It's for us today. Hashem knows exactly what we need. He created us. And I think that, with these different terms that have come along, oh, you're Orthodox or you're conservative, I think that it has unfortunately moved people away from each other. And I think today that I think maybe the leaders of the Orthodox and Reform movements would be very despondent and very upset over where they've gone to, because I don't think this is what they originally intended. When I read about the Enlightenment movement that was begun back in Germany, it wasn't the original intent, although it really was not proper. The original intent was to make it easier for Jewish people to be able to enjoy their religion. And I think that if a human being would understand that we should not put ourselves in the place of God, who knows exactly what we need, I think that that we would be much better off. I think that today the Reform movement has certainly gone way past where they originally started. I think the conservative movement has gone way past where they originally started. And thank God, I am seeing a tremendous growth in the Orthodox communities. People are starting to question their religion. What does this mean? What does that mean? And I think they're now able, especially since Art Scroll and Judaica Press and some of the other wonderful publishing companies have been able to put things in simple English for people to understand. I think it has made a tremendous, tremendous difference, and I would hope very much that that people will look at it and say, gee, I'm starting to see really true things. And again, I don't want to bash anybody that's reform or conservative, but I think that I think it's very important that that we look at the Torah, we look at God's teachings, and we understand that they were not just for ancient times; they are very, very much a part of our life today.
I want to bring this to a close by asking you if there's anything that I haven't touched upon that you wanted to react to, and you're entitled to do that. And could you give me kind of a parting shot of something about being Jewish and studying Judaism that has made you not just a better person, but has allowed you to provide for your city a better future?
Well, I think that ingrained in every Jewish person is charity. I mean, you won't find any other religion probably that's something that I think we're born with. We want to do tzedakah, we want to do chesed, kindness. I think that in my upbringing, my parents, somebody asked me to speak about my mother one time, and I said, I remember as a child, her middle drawer was filled with different charity boxes from different institutions all over the world. And she was very meticulous in making sure that every Friday she put money into each one, and then every year somebody would come from those different institutions, open up the box, count it up, and tell my mother how much she had done for that particular yeshiva that year. I think that that's very, very important. I think that the world situation today, with everything that's going on in Israel and in the Middle East, in Iran, in North Korea, all the challenges that America faces right now, and we have to be very, very grateful to the United States of America, the Jewish people do, because here we get to live in a land of freedom where we get to worship and choose and do what we want within the law, where other places don't allow you to do that sort of thing. I think that we've had this tragedy of the 3 kidnapped boys their bodies being found. Unfortunately, the President of the United States didn't say a word when those boys were found. But the next day, when an Arab boy was found dead, which is also a tragedy and should not have occurred, and the people that did it should be punished. But the White House comes out and condemns that tragedy. I think that unfortunately, anytime Jewish people or Israel does something that's not, I won't say here in Savannah it's different, because in Savannah it's certainly recognized, but around the world, I think the Jewish people are, again, not publicized with anything. I think that there's a tremendous influence by the Arab countries with their oil money. And the only president that I was really proud of, as far as the way he defended Israel, was George W. Bush. He said they had a right to defend themselves, and that just like we don't like the idea that the Arabs came in on 9/11, he said Israel goes through this on a regular basis. He says they certainly have a right to defend themselves. None of the other presidents really felt that strongly, and George W. Bush did, and I'm very proud of the fact that he did. And I hope this has given you some insight into my family and into the Jewish community. It's a wonderful community, and anybody that has the opportunity to come to Savannah and to see Savannah, the city itself, to see the synagogues, it's a wonderful trip, and it's a beautiful place to come.
Thank you very much. Great interview.